Welcome back to this tutorial. So in the previous video, we fixed the path for the blogs, for the collections, and for the product. And what I want to do in this video, I want to talk about the other input we did not touch yet. So I will go back to my documentation. I will click on Create Theme using Liquid. And then I will go to Sections here, and I will look for, you know what, you go to Settings here, and we're going to look for Input Settings. Click there, and there you go. We touch some basic input settings, such as the text, and we also touch some of other specialized input settings. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to be talking about the one that we did not touch yet, such as the checkbox, the number, and the other ones here. Alright, so that you have an idea how to use it. I'm just gonna give an example. We check the documentation, and then we're gonna apply some example to see how we're going to use it. Let's start with the checkbox. The principle is the same. When you're creating an input settings, you must have these three attributes: the type, the ID, and the label. These are required, and the other ones depends on the type of the settings you are. Either the basics one, if you are in the basics one, you can add the defaults and the info if you want to, depends on which input again. And if you're adding some specialized input settings, now it depends on the type of the input itself. For example, if I go use the select here, the select takes the options and the group attribute as well. Okay, the option being required and the group is not required at all. Let's start with the checkbox. I will let you come and learn more yourself. I'm just going to show the basics examples and you're going to apply it by yourself. So if I go back to my store right here, I will create a file just below, or let's say on top of the euro here, so we can see what we're doing straight away. So I will go back to my VS Code and I will open, let's say I'm going to create a file inside the sections directory. Let's call it input-settings.liquid. Let's save it. Let's go back to our index.json. And before our euro here, let's add our settings ID. Let's call it input settings. Let's add an object, add a comma at the end, and let's give it a type. And this type expects a file that exists. So we did create input-settings, I believe. And let's give it some settings attributes. That's going to be an object. Alright, and let's copy this input settings ID and let's add it inside our order here and make sure it's on top of euro. Otherwise it's going to be somewhere else, or bottom or in the middle. Let's add it here and add a comma, and let's save it. Let's close this index.json, and inside the input-settings.liquid, let's create an h1 and let's write input settings. Okay, so I'm going to give it some class. Let's say text 5xl underline text blue 500, something like this, and we can even say text center if you want to. And let's go check. We have an error. Okay, input setting does not refer to an existing file, so maybe we did not copy the correct path. So let's go check. So yeah, I have inputs with S at the end and settings with S as well. So let's go again to the index.json and just correct the name of the file. So it should be here. So we have input with the S and setting with the S. This one is just the ID, and we should be okay. And then we have the input settings on top. Alright, so what I'm going to do next, I'm gonna come to the input settings here. I'm going to create a div where I'm going to have everything we're going to be testing now. So I just want to have some space on top and on the bottom, so we can make a clear differences between this input and the euro. So let's give it a margin top. You know what, let's give it a padding top and bottom of 72, something like this. And let's save it. And now we have a clear space. Alright, so let's start with the checkbox. So if you read the checkbox here, the checkbox is a settings type that outputs a checkbox field. Alright, so let's go see how it is like working. So you have the type must be checkbox. The ID, you give it any name you want. It just need to make sense for you. and the label the same. You give it any name you want. The default here must be a boolean, either a true, either a false. And how to access it? When accessing the value of a checkbox, type settings, data is returned as a boolean. So you need to make sure that the default here is a boolean. So if the default is unspecified, then the value is by default false. Okay, so let's give it a try. Let me come here. Let's create our schema because we need to have a schema. Let's give it a name. Let's call it the input. Okay, I don't need to have a class here. We're gonna go straight to the settings, and we need to have some preset here in the case we want to remove it easily without touching the index.json. So let's call it preset, and let's give it a name. The name here is going to be the input, just like on top, like this. And let's add it some settings, and I'm going to also explain how to add some ID inside the preset here. So let's create our first input. Is going to be type of checkbox, just like we say. So type of checkbox, so this is mandatory, so the type here must be what Shopify provides. You can just come over here, create any type you want, and the ID, you can give it any name you want, so we can call it checkbox. And the label is also mandatory, so let's say show message, for example. And the default is not mandatory, is not required, but if you don't specify that, it's going to be false by default, but let's make it to be false anyway. All right, so let's save it, and let's go back to our customize here. And if we click on our input, we have the show message checkbox here. So you can toggle and you can show some message. But let's add some code to see how it's going to work. So if I come inside our div here, let me add a comment. Let's say here checkbox. So let's say I want to display a message. So let me create a p tag. Let's say the message to display. So if I save it, the HTML is going to be appearing straight away, just like we see over here. So now let's use this checkbox. So I'm gonna come on top. I'm gonna write an if statement because we need to verify if this checkbox is true or false. So we're gonna use the same like we did. So section.settings.checkbox. We're accessing this checkbox, and we can check here if it is true, or let's say if it's equal to true, then we want to show this message, so this p tag. So if I save it, if I go back to my code, and as you can see, the message disappeared because we set it as a default to be false over here. And if I come now and I toggle this show message, we're gonna have the message appearing like this. And if I save it and I override the change, and we're gonna have it appearing here. If I go back here, refresh, we're gonna have the message here. If I come back, I toggle back, disappeared. If I save it, I go back here, I save, and we have no message anymore. You have to reload. Yeah, there you go. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna stop right here, and let's talk about the next one. All right, so now let's talk about the next input, and I believe is the number. So the number, it's very simple as well. The number can also take some additional input such as the placeholder, but bear in your minds that is not required, so you can add it or skip it. It's really up to you. And this type of input could be used, for example, in the collection page. Let's say when you have like many products and you want to select the number to display the product, like the number of the product, I mean. And this is how to use it. Of course, the type must be number. The ID is up to you. Just add something that makes sense. The label is up to you as well. And the default here is set to 20. And when accessing the value of number, the data is returned as a number or as nil if nothing has been entered. Here, the default attribute is optional. And however, if you're gonna use it, it must be a number, not a string. So let's try to add this one. I will go back to my VS Code. Let's create another type of number here. So we're gonna give it a type. The type must be number. And then we're gonna give it an ID. So let's say something number. So let's add a label. Let's call it the number or select the number. That's really up to you. and I will give it a default, and the default, let's say I will add like 30, and I can add a placeholder if I want to, and the placeholder we can say add number, and we can also add the info if you want to, and we can say this number will be used for something. So let's save it. Let's check if we have some error. We have no error. Let's go back to our customizer, and as you can see, we have the number 30 here. So I can click here to decrease, I can click on top here to increase, I can also like add a number as I wish, and it's going to work. And we can use this selection here to output it, so it's going to be the same principles. So we can come here, we can say if the number, because we have to verify if the number is not blank, because if you go back to your documentation, it says here when accessing the number value, okay, it's returned as two format, either as a number, either as a nil, if nothing has been entered. Okay, so we have to be sure that we are having something, otherwise we're gonna get a nil that can result to an error. Okay, so we have to be sure that is either blank or, not blank or not empty. Let me try to use this one. And we have to access the number correctly, so it's going to be section.settings, that's the ID, which in my case is number. Okay, this one. All right, and if this is true, then we want to display the number, so we can add some text. Let me add some p tag. Let me copy this one. Let's add it here, and we can say something like sample, the number selected is, and let's print now the number. So section that settings, that's number, and if I save it, and as it is already selected, so we're gonna get some values here, and the number selected is 30, because if I save now this one, we're gonna have 34. There you go. So if I come back here and I refresh, yeah, we're going to have 34. All right, next is going to be the radio. The radio could be used, for example, to decide if you want to have a different design for the left, for the center. That's really up to you. It's like the select, it's not different at all. I'm going to write the two codes for the radio and for the select, and you're gonna see the differences, but overall it's the same principle, it's not different at all. I'm gonna see you in a few. So I went along and I add the two settings for the radio and for the select, just to show you. If I go back here, so this is for the radio. We're going to do it again, don't worry about it. So this is the radio and this is the select type. So select type and select radio. In the practice is the same. So you can use either the radio if you want this type of the design, or you can use the select if you want this type of design. So the use case here could be, for example, if I want this text to be either on the left, on the center, or on the right. So I can go and create a type of radio or a type of select to be like toggling if I want to be centered or left or centered for the radio. Is going to be the same. Okay, so I'm going to delete it and now give you the use case for the radio, which is going to be the same for the select, which we already talked about earlier. So I'll see you in a few. Alright, so let's go back to see how the radio is going to work. If you go back to your documentation, the radio output a radio option field. This is the design how it's going to be. The radio accepts as a required attribute the type, the ID, and the label. This you already know. If you want to use the radio, the type must be radio, and the ID and the label is up to you. But the radio accepts also other attributes such as the option. And the options is going to be an array of objects. And here you can have a lot of objects here, but inside these objects you need to have two properties, the values and the label. So the values, just like the name status, is the value, and the label is the label of that value. And you must, after the array of options, you need to specify a default, and you can also add info if you want to, and you can come to read more of it right here. And when accessing the value of radio, the data is returned as a string. if the default is unspecified, the first option is selected as default. So if you don't mention this default here, it's going to grab the first value of this object as a default, the first value. Okay, so let's give it a try. And we go back to our VS Code and let's create a type of radio. So type is going to be radio, so this is mandatory, and the ID is going to be us to us, but let's call it radio. The label, which is mandatory, let's also call it, let's say, center text. All right, so and then we need to give it options, and this option is an array, and this array accepts object inside. This object must have two properties. One of them is the label and the second is the value. So let's give you example case. Let's come back to our code here. As you can see, we have this text centered on the middle. So let's say I want to be able to toggle the text to be centered on left, on the middle, and on the right. So I can use the radio to do exactly that. I can come here, I will say label, let's say left, and the value, because I'm using Tailwind CSS, so I'm gonna copy this one, okay, because I just want to play with the class. So I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna say value, and the value here, don't forget to add the double quotes, and the value here is going to be text left. And again, remember, this is a Tailwind value. If I was using CSS, so I can use some classes here and to target this class inside HTML or CSS. That's really up to you, but in my case I'm using Tailwind here, so I'm gonna, because I want to be toggling the text left, right, and middle, I want now to use the Tailwind class for that. So let me quickly show an example before even continuing here. So let me save it for now. Let's see if I don't get any error. We don't have. If I come back on the text here, just let me show you so that you have an understanding. If I go text left like this, if I save it, normally the text goes left. If I go text right like this, the text is going to be on the right, just like you see here. Okay, so instead of doing that manually, we have a way to do it on Shopify, like automatically. So let's add the next object. So it's going to be, we're going to give it label of center, and the value is going to be text center, again a Tailwind value. Let's add another object, the last one for this case. The label is going to be right, and the value is going to be text right. And in my case, I'm going to add a default so that when the site starts, it's already set to something. If you don't set the default, it's gonna grab the first value of the first object. But in my case, I want to have text center, so I'm just gonna copy the value of the second object and add it here. And it must be string, remember. And of course, we can also add some info here if you want to. We can say position your text. So if I save it, let me check my terminal, we have no error. If I go back now, I go to my customize, and now we have text center, and we have even our info over here, position your text. And now we have three values, left, center, and right. By default, it's centered to the middle, to center. But as you can see, the text is on the right because I moved the Tailwind class there. So now let's make it more dynamic. If I come back, remember just to grab the ID. In our case, it's called radio. So I'm gonna come on top here. I'm going to remove these things. So you can either use an if statement here if you want to, but in my case, I'm going to access directly the liquid code. So I'm gonna say section.settings.radio, my bad, like this. If I save it and if I come back, now the text is supposed to be in the middle because we set it to be center here. So if I press left, it's going to be to the left itself. If I go right, it's gonna go to the right itself. So this radio is the same principles, just like using the select. It's going to be the same. It's not different at all. We talked about the range already. So the range accepts other attribute as well. So let's make some exercise about it quickly. So if I come back here and I say, let me add an input, after the radio, let me add an input of the range. So type must be range, and we can give it an ID. I will call it again range, and the label, we can call it select between, 10 and 100, and then we can give it a min, could be 10, the max could be 100, and the step could be 1 or 10. Let's make it 10, and the unit here again, it's up to you. Let's say pixel, we can even say seconds, we can say millisecond, up to you. RAM, up to you. Okay, I will leave it to pixel. This is just to showcase on the Shopify admin so that you have an idea what you're doing, and it will take a default, and in this case I believe the default is mandatory. Let's go read. The default is required, yes, and the minimum, max, step, and default attribute can't be a string value, so this must be boolean, numbers, sorry. And yeah, so the default here is required. So let's give it 50, and we can add the info here if you want to. I'm not gonna do it. If I save, we go back in our customizer, and then we have the range. So this already used it somehow. Okay, so if you move, I think we used it with the animation here. So when we were like adding the speed of the animation on the small mobile. I'm not gonna give the example for this one because we already touched it. Alright, so we already also talked about the select, the text, and the text area. So let me just remind you about the text area quickly before to let you go. And again, let's add an input here, type of text area. If you want to have some longer text, you can use text area without the formatting. And the ID, we can give it text area, and the label could be text area. And and I think you can use the placeholder. Let me go check the documentation. When you use the text area, yes, you can use the default if you want to. You can also use the placeholder, but it's not required. And it's just like the text, the same principles, nothing different. Let me first show you how the text area is going to look. If I come back here, so this is how the text area is going to look. Let me refresh the page. If I click on this input, so this is how the text area is gonna look. If I write some text here and I save it, and we just go section settings, that the ID of the text area is gonna show the text over here. Just is the same like the inline rich text or the rich text input, just this is without the formatting. Okay, so let me show you how to add this ID of the settings inside the preset, because when you finish to build your store, so you want to give it to a store owner, it's better to do it with already predefined default value. And to do so, we need to add all the IDs inside the settings here. If we have some blocks, we can create some blocks as well here inside the preset and like refer to that blocks as well. Okay, so let me give you two examples. So I'm gonna grab the ID of the checkbox. So you come to the ID, you grab the ID like this, you copy the ID, you go back to the preset here inside the settings object. So you open these curlies and you paste the ID like this. Okay, and then as we're using the checkbox, we set the default to be false, and the default here is false. Let me try the number. So I will grab the ID number. So you have to grab the ID. Okay, in my case, I call it number, and we just come inside the preset, inside the settings here, after the checkbox. Okay, add a comma, I paste it here, and the number here we set the default there was what? The default for the number was 30. So I'm gonna come back here, I'm gonna add a 30 as a number. Okay, let's add another one. The other one was what? It was the radio. This is like very interesting example. So let's copy the radio here. Okay, let's make sure we have the two quotes, and we come to the preset, we add it like this. Okay, and the radio head, I'm just gonna copy the default. So I will grab the value of the default is going to be text center, and I will add it like this over here. Okay, and next what we had, Next we had the range. So the range is the same example. So I'm just gonna copy the ID just for practice. So, and we're gonna add it over here, and we're gonna give it the default that was 50. So let's grab the 50, we add it here. So even though the store owner goes later on change the value and stuff, okay, it is not gonna affect this one. This is just as a default when you creating the store, and let's say like you want to give it to another store owner, so you download and you give it, and it's gonna come with this value as a default. Okay, and in a case we had some blocks, for example, let's simulate we have some blocks here just to show you how to add a blocks inside the preset. So let me add a blocks like this, and we have different type of blocks as well. For now we just learn about the blocks within the section. Okay, so we will talk about the other one soon. So we have the blocks as a team, we have the blocks as an app, we have like this thing here as an app, as a team, and these two are fairly new to me. But yeah, let's give it, the one we learn is about, we give it a name. So let's say my name, okay, as a block name, and usually the type just follow the name like this. And here it can accept a limit and the settings. And the settings here is going to be the same principle like this one. We already saw how to use the blocks. So how can we now reference these blocks, okay, inside our preset? It's very simple, even easier than the settings. We add a comma, we add the blocks attribute here is like an array, and here we have a couple of stuff. We have to reference the object, and we have access to more attribute, but we're just gonna use the type, and the type, if we use the block within the section like I did here, we're just gonna go copy the type name like this, and we're going to add it over here, my bad, like this. Okay, and if I save it, we're not gonna get any error whatsoever. And if I have another blocks here, let's say if I copy this one and I add it like this, and I call it like my name 2, this is the type, and let's add a different name here. And if I want to reference this second block inside my preset, I'm just gonna copy the type name, or just the type, and inside the blocks I will create another object that will accept again a type, and this time with different name like this. Okay, so this is how you create preset for the blocks. You learn how to do it with the settings, and now you do it with the blocks. All right, so I'm gonna stop right here, and I'll see you on the next video where we will talk about the specialized input settings. Bye.